I'm Robert Cavuto, and today on Sonic Perspectives, we're speaking with DERRY GREHAN of Honeymoon Suite to talk about their new album, Alive, that came out earlier this month of February. I'm so excited to speak to you today. Thank you for your time.
Oh, no problem, man. Happy to talk to you. How are you?
I'm doing great. You probably hear this all the time, but you were the soundtrack to, my dating experiences in 1984, 1985. It was just such a great album. Tremendous. This one, and I think I have the other one on cassette somewhere, and I have this one. On,
Awesome. Oh, that's great.
I
That's
should get
great.
the other one on vinyl. Big
You should
prize.
get you should get the big prize to complete the triumvirate there.
Right, exactly. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you today because you always put out such great music. And like I mentioned, I've been a fan of the band since 1984. I never really heard of Honeymoon Suite on the radio. I saw your New Girl Now video, and then I worked in a record store and we would listen to new releases. And that's my introduction to you. How come you think Honeymoon Suite never really broke well into the US as big as you were in Canada?
Well, there's a million reasons, but we remember the first record came out and it actually, got a lot of interest in the States. MTV was brand new, so we were getting a ton of airplay with New Girl Now,
Right.
and the video was on MTV. And then we came back with the big prize, which did, twice the numbers, three times the numbers, because we were on this upward trajectory because we were
Right.
on Warner Brothers down there. And Feel It Again charted at number 30. And, I mean, it's not like we weren't on the radio and had videos because we were a lot. And then come the third album, I think we went probably a little heavier direction. But I think the main reason is, in my mind, we didn't have that breakthrough top 10 single like a Living on a Prayer or something of that nature that just broke it all open. We're all trying to do that, of course, but that seems to be what the bands that's what puts them over the top is the, Round and Round by Rat or,
Right.
that the big song. And we put out Love Changes Everything, but it didn't crack, the top 10 or the top 50. I don't know. But that's just the business, man. We put out the best music we could. And
Yeah, absolutely. Great music.
mhm.
It's some of my best beach listening music. I love going to the beach, and this is always with me, and I always enjoy listening to those three albums nonstop. So it's
Cool,
great. Was
cool.
it a deliberate attempt to make Racing After Midnight heavier than what you maybe did in the past?
No, I think it was the switch in producers. We'd worked with Bruce Fairburn on
Okay.
the Big Prize, which was to me one of our best albums
Great.
sonically, and material was great. And Bruce just did an amazing job, and the mix was amazing. And I wanted Bruce to do the follow-up album, but unfortunately, right after us, he did the Bon Jovi record, the Slippery album, and then after that, he was just a busy guy after that,
Right.
and he would have worked with us again, but we would have had to wait a while because now he was a superstar, and the label was pressuring us, saying, you can't wait 2 or 3 years to put your next album out because you have momentum.
Right.
So fortunately, because we're on Warner's in L.A., Ted Templeman was head of A&R there, and he kind of took a liking to the band, and that's a whole other long story. But it ended up he offered to produce the third album, and I think he was concentrating more on the guitar element of it and not so much on the keyboards. We changed keyboard players with Rob Bruce, so we didn't have that Ray Colburn stuff going on,
Right.
and I think that changed the sound slightly. So we did the best we could. I love working with Ted, but it was a different album than Bruce would have made.
I get it. I get it. I honestly think Alive is a tremendous album. I don't think there's a bad song on there. No filler. It's fantastic. And I honestly, if I could position it in my mind, something between The Big Prize and Racing After Midnight. Would you kind of agree to that? It kind of fits right in there in line.
I totally do. I really do. I think it's got all those elements.
Yeah.
The response to this album has been amazing. People just love it. And I think a lot of kudos goes to Mike Crumpus, who produced it.
Mhm.
He's a guy from Toronto who grew up listening to Honeymoon Suite, so he was a fan of the band.
Yeah.
He's younger than us, but his production, he's a rock guy, you know, but at the same time, he gave the record a real modern edge.
Mhm.
So an older band like us got to be careful. We want to not alienate our fans and write Honeymoon Suite songs, big choruses and stuff, but we don't want to put out a dated sounding flat record. And
Agreed.
Mike really brought all the elements in and kind of put them together. And I think that's why people love this album so much. It sounds fresh, it sounds vibrant, and it's edgy and new, but it's classic.
Right.
Honeymoon.
It has that familiar feel to it that
Yeah.
positions it right there. It's interesting that you say that you got a fan of the band to produce it, you know, because he was a big fan. The Scorpions did that. The Scorpions are one of my personal favorite bands, and they did that for Sting in the Tail. They went out and found two guys who were huge, you know, great producers and great fans of it that brought their old sound back. You know, they had a couple of albums that were just so-so, and then they put out Sting in the Tail and they really took off. So it's interesting that you took that perspective. I think that's fantastic.
Well, I think producer choice is pretty critical when you're trying to do that. You can hire the biggest producer in the world to do your record, but if he doesn't understand your music, or he's producing the record for himself and
Right.
not really for what the band and the fan, you know, their audience knows them for, that can be a mistake.
Right. You touched upon this a little bit. I want to expand upon it a little bit more. What were some aspects of the first two albums that you really loved and wanted, maybe intentionally wanted to incorporate in Alive?
Well, just writing, first of all, it starts with the songs, the writing, and that took us a long time. And Johnny and myself and Mike, we're the three of us put our heads together and we kind of wrote the whole record as we went along. So songs first and foremost, and we spent a lot of time writing and rewriting, and I think that shows in the end. But with elements of the first album was done, we were real young, and it was done really quick, and you can hear that urgency in the music, but it's got that first album young band sound, and it's got that energy. Second album, big prize. Now all of a sudden there's more money, there's better producers, more of a budget, much slicker sounding,
Right.
and that just elevated. That's a whole other album, and just as good as the first one, but different.
Right.
So I think between those two, what we've incorporated in Alive is those two things together.
That's great. That's great. One of my personal favorite song is Broken. And I'm really surprised that you didn't pick that as a single. That is the most catchy song, I think, out of anything you've ever done. Holy cow.
Yeah, I didn't know. That's a funny one to me. That's one that took a while to write, and I didn't know where, when I sequenced the record, it was really hard to place everything where it flows. But I think it's good where it is because there's so many strong tracks.
Yeah.
I think I paced it okay. Broken is kind of back there on the album, but that's a good thing because just when you think, you know, you've passed the first three or four really great songs, bang, another couple of great songs come near the end. So it just keeps the interest going. And I love Broken. It took us a while. There's one of those songs that didn't have a chorus for the longest time.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, banging my head against the wall. And Johnny and I were over in England cutting our final demos with Mike, or final mixes and overdubs. And we still hadn't finished Broken. I remember sitting in our cottage. Johnny and I rented a cottage for the 2 weeks we were there out in the country. And we'd get up every day and get our breakfast and our coffee, work on that damn song. And finally, you know, my eyes are now open. You know, we finally nailed that. We brought it in the studio and played it for Mike. He says, yeah, there's your chorus. So I'm glad you like it. Thank you.
I love it. Did you have the melody, just not the words, or nothing?
Kind of both. I think we had the my eyes. You know, you got to have that hook.
Right.
And you got to have the lyric, but it's got to be hooky and it's got to sing. And you know, Johnny's is a good barometer to that. I'll throw something out at him. He'll go, wait, no, I like that. My eyes, you know, it's hooky. So we went with that and wrote it around that.
That's great. You know, one of my favorite aspects of the band's catalog is the loneliness and the longingness of love. But yet there's still a positive message to almost every song. You know, you're not giving up on anything. Is that a conscious decision of loneliness, longingness, but yet positivity that all comes out at the end?
Sounds like my life. Well, love is, yeah, we've written a lot of love songs. They're not all love songs, but there's so many angles to love. And there's
Absolutely.
so many, yeah, so many, you know, you got to be careful to don't want to write this. It's coming up with a newer, fresher angle on the same
Yeah.
old topic of love, breaking up, getting back together, new love, old love, whatever. You just, I don't know, you kind of like kind of look at your lyric and take a different perspective on things. Like Alive, the first track, is not necessarily about a relationship, a love story. It could be about relationships with somebody in your family or somebody you know. I just want to feel alive. No, nothing you can say can talk me out of you. It could be your relationship to anybody, your brother, your sister. It's just got a really uplifting message, and I think the lyrics are very. We spent a lot of time on.
Yeah, I think you hit the mark with all those songs on there and your career. They're not sappy love songs, like they're not like, oh my God, this is so dated. This is so not interesting. I think that they really hold your interest, and you could look at it from many different angles of the mood you're in. So depending upon any state, like you mentioned earlier, of love, you could relate to it somehow, and you could relate to the lyrics of it. So I love that aspect about the band.
Well, thank you, and don't forget we have Mike's perspective on things too, because he's also he's a producer, a guitar player, he's a songwriter. He's written with a lot of Grammy people, so he brought his expertise to the writing situation in a newer way, because he's worked with a lot of newer artists. So he brought that perspective in, and I also, from my daughter Leah Marlene, she's 22, and I get exposed to all the music she listens to,
Oh, wow.
and the new music, what the kids are listening to, and the lyric stuff are influencing me to write a good lyric, not a fire desire lyric, which I actually did in Love Changes Everything.
Yeah.
But it works there, trying to get away from the cliche stuff and find a new fresh angle on it.
Another favorite of mine was Done Doing Me. What a great sleazy rock song. It's with a little bit of an edge to it. It's great. I love
Yeah,
that.
we had that's a riff of mine,
Yeah.
That's a nasty riff, and I put the octaver on it to make it big and low and nasty sounding. So the song kind of had to be nasty.
Yeah.
And if you look at our albums that we put out, they're all different. On our albums, every song seems to be different. And I like that about Honeymoon Suite. You get a bit of everything on our records. So if you look at The Big Prize, you got Bad Attitude, right?
Right.
Which is a nasty kind of song. And that's kind of what Done Doing Me is about. And Johnny came in with the title Done Doing Me. So we had to make that about a guy who's not so happy with his ex. You got to have one of those. That's kind of like what New Girl is, but
Yeah.
it's just another angle on love, or the lack of love.
Or the hope of love, or the
Yeah, or the bye-bye love.
bye. Yeah.
Everybody can relate to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love also there's some diversity on the new album. There's different vibes, different feels for a lot of the songs, and it seems to be consistent though with all your albums. Was there an album that you think Honeymoon Suite ever deviated a little too far from maybe the first three albums that really brought you the success that you guys have?
Yeah, I would say Monsters Under the Bed is an album that was it was at the end of our Warner deal. We'd had the Racing After Midnight, and then the last record we did was Monsters Under the Bed. It was at the end of the 80s and the early 90s. Dave and Gary had left the band at that point for a while, and so it was just me and Johnny, and we got some session players in and another producer, and we started writing kind of different songs, a little more socially conscious songs, and we went in a few directions, just trying some new things. But also remember, this was the beginning of grunge and Nirvana and all of that, and the writing was on the wall for us and all the 80s bands.
Right.
No matter what you did, you were not going to get the attention, because grunge took over and killed us all for a while. So Monsters on the Bed is a great record, but it's a different record.
Right.
I'm proud of it, but it came out at the wrong time. But we do the best we can in that time period, and we just keep making music.
One of the fascinating things too is about the band is the inferences you make to Niagara Falls, whether it's in the artwork, whether it's in a video that you guys do. Tell me, and the titles of the album, titles of the towns in your area. Tell me about what Niagara Falls means to you guys. I would imagine you grew up close to it. You grew up in and around Niagara Falls. Tell me about that aspect.
Johnny grew up in Niagara Falls.
Not
Maybe,
the water.
yeah, well, you know, you have Niagara Falls, you have the tourist stuff and all the fan stuff. Then you
Yeah.
go a couple of miles away and there's all the suburbs and the not so nice part of Niagara Falls. That's where Johnny grew up. And I grew up about 10 miles away from him in St. Catharines, in the same exact area. We would go down there as kids all the time to the falls. But when you live there in a tourist town, you go down, it's like, oh, I've seen it 100 times. We just go down there and hang out and smoke weed and walk around Clifton Hill for the day when we were teenagers, you know. But well, growing up in that area was a great area because they had lots of bars that all the rock bands from Toronto would come down and play. We could go to concerts in Buffalo at the Odd, or we could go up to Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. Each one was like an hour away. So between those two big venues, we could see every major band that was on tour.
Right.
So we had that strategic, you know, geographically where we grew up was a great area. We had lots going on around us. So I think that influenced us. Like it was just music and music and music. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, there's so many rock bars with live bands,
Right.
concert bands. So that's where I, you know, cut my teeth, and I would play in bands as a kid and go out and see bands, and just
That's
it was a
great.
good environment.
Honeymoon Suite is to Niagara Falls as Bon Jovi is to the Jersey Shore.
Yeah, exactly. And Johnny, he had the name, the band formed. I didn't. I joined about 6 months after he formed it, and it was already called Honeymoon Suite because he didn't know what he wanted to call it. And somebody suggested that in order to kind of play up the Niagara Falls angle, and it stuck. So there we are.
That's great.
We shot Burning in Love off the first album. We wanted to play up the Niagara Falls thing. So if you look at that video, that's all done in Niagara Falls.
Okay.
So circa 2023, we needed to shoot a video for Alive.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to kind of do it in Toronto to get an industrial feel with all the cool buildings. But Johnny said, why don't we go down to the falls and shoot another one just to kind of go full circle?
Yeah.
Which is what we did.
That's true. All the people in the background, did they know who you were?
No, man, it was just guerrilla video recording. We just showed up with a film crew and they said, start walking. And the people had no idea what we were doing. And so we just started walking amongst all the tourists. And I think that's the best way to catch people like that. They had no clue what was going on.
Was music blaring that Johnny was lip syncing to?
Yeah, but it was on a little like speaker, you know, a little Bluetooth speaker.
Okay.
So it was loud enough that he could hear it, you know, to lip sync along with it. You know, one person would be holding it as we walk. So it was guerrilla video recording, if you want, you know what I mean? But we got it done.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, as before we got on camera together, we were talking a little bit about the 3 shows in the New Jersey area that were canceled last weekend with Aldo Nova.
Yeah.
I was so disappointed. I was like really heartbroken. Well, can you tell us what happened to those 3 shows?
Just the promoter got cold feet. The ticket sales were not going well.
Oh.
And it was a smaller promoter. And at the last minute, they pulled the shows, unfortunately, because they didn't want to take a bath. And that's too bad. I don't, you know, who do you blame for that, right? Do you blame Aldo, or Aldo was the headliner, or do you blame us, or, you know, you've got to do advertising. So I don't know. It's unfortunate. That rarely happens, but
Yeah.
I hope we can come back.
It's interesting because there was a bunch of my friends who are really surprised were like the band, you know, they're really heavy metal heads, and they were saying they couldn't wait to go to the show too. So it was, you know, you bring a lot of audiences in Aldo. I thought it was a great team up, and you know, hopefully you come back. Or you think you'll do something again, different venue?
I hope. Oh yeah, I hope so. We're starting to play a lot more in the U.S. now, finally, thankfully, and I think this record's going to help that because I live in the States. I've lived down here for 20 years.
Oh, really? Where?
Yeah, I live in Illinois, a couple of hours south of Chicago in Bloomington, but I also have a second place where I am now in Nashville that I rent a house with my daughter because she's down here working on her music.
Right.
So I'm going back and forth, but I seem to spend a little more time in Nashville now because I really want to move here eventually. But my wife and I have our main house in Illinois, but we're thinking of making the move.
No, Nashville's a great town. I've always wanted to go there, but from the pictures and the music air, the music in the air and that main road where all the signs looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's Broadway. I mean, that's the tourist part of
Yeah.
Nashville. It's really exploded. It's got a little annoying, actually. I mean, it's nuts down there. If you want to
Yeah.
go down and drink and listen to country music, have a good time, yeah, it's fun. But for me, for the musicians, there's a whole other world in Nashville of writers and guitar players and music people here, and it's not just country.
You were saying earlier that you and your daughter were going out doing shows or a little tour. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, her name is Leah Marlene, and she was on American Idol 2 seasons ago, and she
Oh,
finished in
wow.
the top three. So she went all the way to the end and did amazing. So that really was a great career boost for her.
Mhm.
And she moved back to Nashville. She'd been there before going to school, but she loves Nashville, and she's here and just working on the next step in her career, trying to. She just released an EP and she's looking for management and maybe a label deal at some point, but she wants to take her time. She's an excellent writer, a beautiful voice, and she goes out on little tours. She did one last year. So this one we just did was about 2 weeks. It was like a little winter club tour.
Right.
And of course, I go out with her because I like to keep an eye on things on the road. But fortunately, we did a duo this time. So actually, I was playing with her every night, which was kind of fun.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
sometimes we take a band, sometimes it's just me and her. And we did a bunch of clubs up the East Coast, and we ended up we were in Asbury Park,
Right.
and then we finished in New York. So
That's pretty great.
it was great. I just got back from that.
And could I find that information on her website or Facebook so I could track you guys down sometime?
Yeah, you just put in Leah Marlene is her
All right.
name. She's on Instagram. She's on all the socials. Her music is wonderful.
Wow, I
And
hope to see it. I'd love to see it. I'd love to say hello to you. So yeah, that would be fantastic.
yeah, and she's opened for Honeymoon Suite before too on several shows. And so it's a whole thing. Yeah.
And the rest of the tour with Honeymoon Suite and Aldo is still taking place. It was just those 3 shows that were canceled, or was the whole tour canceled?
No, it wasn't like we don't do long tours. The Aldo thing was like a couple of one-offs that we did. I think we're doing a couple more in Canada. Yeah, there's this little 80s package that we're doing with Aldo and Men Without Hats. I think we got one or two more of those shows, but Aldo's kind of like sporadic dates with him. Not really a tour.
Okay, got it. Well, listen, it was a real pleasure to speak with you, and I was so excited. You've been such an influence in my music over the years, and I really appreciate it. And it's really nice to tell you that and to speak with you today. It was an insightful interview. Thank you so much.
Oh, great talking with you too, man. Thank you.
All right, and I hope to see you and your daughter or with Honeymoon Suite when you come
Yeah,
back.
sorry we missed you. We'll come back somehow. We
Sounds
need to
great.
get out that way.
Thank you. Have a
Okay.
great day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.